When I became chief operating officer 2 years ago, Bitget was top 20 as an exchange and had only 12 million users. Today we have 100 million users. We are the second largest exchange. It was a skyrocket kind of a growth. That was our biggest bet. We almost were spending 90% of our marketing budget into this partnership. We knew that we are losing this bidding war. What we did, we just sent him like a 10-point bullet point list why he has to work with Bitget and how Bitget will actually not fail him. We talked about our protection fund, our safety, and that was the reason actually he signed with us. We are not a family, we are an Olympics team. We are there to win the gold medal. We don't want to build a family culture where we accept people as they are, but we want to build a future where we push the boundaries to the maximum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Money podcast, the show where we talk about crypto and hopefully find out how the future of money looks like. As always, I've got the Lydian lion behind me, which is essentially, you guys know this, the oldest coin of the world. And with me today, I've got Vugar, who is very much driving the frontier of our industry and shaping the future of money. COO at Bitget. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. You know, I'm always on TikTok and Instagram scrolling, and there was a huge trend in last 1 year, like old money style. And it's very fun to have a new money podcast. And I love how we are embracing the fact that, you know, it's a new era, it's a new money, rather than trying to pose ourselves that everything is old and established. We are just still paving the way for future.
No, I agree. And we're excited to run the show. And thanks for joining us. I think I'll give like a brief introduction before we jump right in. Bitget has been one of the most exciting growth stories in the ecosystem over the last months and years. You are now one of the largest cryptocurrency exchange ecosystems globally. You guys released new growth numbers, which we're going to unpack, how you went from 20 million to 100 million users in about a year. And I think all of these numbers are reflective on the platform, right? Where went from 160 billion quarterly spot trading volume to 600 billion quarterly spot trading volume. So an incredibly scaled operation. And Vugar, you are the man who kind of like stepped in as a COO to run this operation. And we're excited to unpack everything growth, marketing, regulation, geographical expansion, and your personal journey today. So once again, thank you very much for joining us. And I think when I was researching, when we were prepping, we saw you are also a podcast host. So maybe I'd love to get your take. What makes a good podcast episode?
Honestly, like, because I come from a marketing background and then I stepped into operations, I always look into ways how we can grow and how we can talk and how to get a platform. And my media background brought me to podcast back in times when I was still the CMO at Being Crypto. That's how it started. And my idea was to focus on the non-trading part of the crypto, because usually when you talk about crypto or blockchain or Web3, people always think of charts and trading, but I believe there are more ways to earn money. And usually, even at Bitget, more than 90% of the team members, they don't trade. Even though they work in a crypto company, they earn crypto assets, they invest long-term in terms of the dollar cost averaging, buying and holding, but they don't do day trading. I think that is my core goal when we talk about crypto, about the new money, as your podcast addressed. And for me, what makes a good podcast is diving into the personal journeys, but also trying to understand what things are scalable, because I always believe personal journeys are so unique, you can't copy it. You can't copy what Warren Buffett did to become a new Warren Buffett, or Elon Musk did to become a new Elon Musk. Therefore, we need to kind of draw the lines that what are the things that made who they are, but also which things can actually be copied.
I think that makes a bunch of sense. And maybe we do just that and jump into your personal story, which I think is pretty unique. I mean, 5 years ago, you were so very much outside of the crypto world, right? And marketing director at Sony. And now you're kind of leading one of these scaled cryptocurrency operations. What pulled you in and what made you take the leap back in the day when you stepped in?
That's a very interesting journey, because I come from Middle East, and as a Middle Eastern family, like, for example, going to university is important. Education was very important for my family. I ended up doing my master's at Harvard. I did my PhD at Oxford, and all this academic focus actually kind of led me to the traditional business where you work in a Fortune 500 companies. I consulted at Bain, and all these things kind of built a good kind of on-page CV, let's say, to make your family and friends proud. but also like I always had this like entrepreneurial journey in me, and I wanted always to do something of my own. And back in times, I randomly met my ex co-founder who was building a he had a vision, but he didn't have money to hire me. But also, I was bored at my job, and I ended up building a ad tech Web2 startup, which eventually we was valued at 2.7 billion. We got around 470 million CBS Capital's investment, and rest is the history, because I was 20 something and I got that much money in my bank account. I was like, what I have to do next? And eventually I end up joining a VC and investing into different firms. And that was back in 2018 when I opened the doors of the crypto for myself and invested to bunch of crypto startups. I don't say that it was the best time, because it was this ICO boom. People were excited about everything, and I end up losing a bunch of money, but also I did a lot of wise investments. And yeah, I ended up in crypto now after 2.5 cycles. I always say, like, if someone hasn't been to crypto one full cycle of bull market and bear market, they are not truly understanding what's happening. And with all these craziness, people issuing bunch of tokens, founders raising money to go buy Lamborghini and NFT rush. And today we are seeing a very crazy patterns also with institutional money comes, I don't know, world leaders manipulating in the market and everything that goes up and down. I think it's a very interesting and exciting time to be in crypto or to come to crypto. But also, as I always say, like, there are more than one way to earn in crypto rather than trade. Therefore, let's discuss how we can help others. And especially like someone like me who runs an exchange and comes tells people that trading isn't the only way to make money. I think people need to kind of listen to carefully, because as an exchange, we earn money when people transact and when people trade. And definitely trading is an interesting tool, but is not for everyone, in my opinion.
And we're going to unpack all of that, maybe kind of like double clicking on the very, very beginnings. You guys investing in crypto during the ICO boom. What was like the worst investment you guys made during that period of time?
Honestly, we've invested a bunch of interesting people, promising people. And the biggest mistake was that we were kind of investing because of the hype and fear of missing out to people who wanted to raise the money, issue the token, and then go figure out what they want to do. But also with that FOMO and bunch of people jumping and people not making enough due diligence. And also another big problem was that the traditional Web2 businesses work differently, right? You have your runway, you know how many people you're going to hire. You need another 2 years, to build your product. But with crypto, it is much shorter. In 5, 6 months, you want someone to build a product, to market it, earn money, issue tokens. All these things should happen in 6 months, which is unrealistic. And still, these requirements stay till today, which makes it a very kind of a wild, wild west feeling when it comes to investing. Because also, as an investor, you still want to be in a bull run within the investment period that you can cash out if something goes down. And that was the biggest problem also of ICO boom, when people were raising money without understanding what they have to do. There was a very limited way of controlling once you transfer the funds, how the founders were spending it. And unfortunately, most of the founders during that time were the people who made quick money through trading or through some investments, that they never run companies. They didn't know how products work, how to hire, how to build. And eventually they thought that the money that they raised was their own money, and they went on hosting big parties, I don't know, buying nice watches and cars without actually thinking what gonna come next or what kind of product they want to build. And eventually we know what happened, like hundreds of projects just never came out.
And if you're kind of like now fast forward, kind of diligencing and looking at new crypto projects that people want you to engage with, invest in, whatever, what red flags are you looking out for, and what kind of like DD glasses have you learned to put on?
Honestly, like forever that was my mantra, but like not always you are able to follow, because that fear of missing out, especially how things fast happen in crypto. One of the key points for me is always look for a project when you have a founder's face. I don't know, even if the best project out there, most promising, if I don't know the founder, if the founder doesn't want to put his face, I don't know, it's a guy with a mask or some NFT profile, I would definitely not engage with that project. With all due respect to friends and family members who do something like this, I think for me, if someone isn't comfortable to put your face behind their project, it means you shouldn't be comfortable putting your money to their project either. That's the first important thing. Second important thing is looking into the people's background. I know there are a lot of first time founders, a lot of successful projects out there, but also looking at credentials of a person is important to understand. Have they run successful business? Do they have a discipline of building something? And I always say, for example, basic information such how long someone worked at any company. If I see a founder that I don't know worked in 4 companies, 6 months in each, I would definitely not be comfortable. Or sometimes people say that, oh, you are too old school. You are looking what kind of education people have. And I always say, for me, the key element of education, or let's say any degree, is not about someone's education. It doesn't show how smart someone is. For me, it shows that someone for 4 years woke up at, I don't know, 9 a.m. and went to university, fulfilled some task to earn that credential, which shows to me a pattern that this person has some discipline and they have a way of following a procedure to reach the goal. But also there are very, very cool and interesting projects out there that being founded by non-degree holder first time graduates. Therefore it is not like 100% recipe, and I don't think that we always 100% need to follow this, but it is kind of a good indicators. And lastly, I always ask people two key information. One is, do they have a roadmap? Do they know where they want to go and what they're gonna do with the money that they are raising, who they want to hire, how much this will cost them? Because sometimes people have unrealistic expectation of the market. If they're going to hire, I don't know, for their mobile app 3 React, I don't know, developers, I always ask like, do you know how much salary they charge? And with the money you are raising, probably you won't be able to even hire these 3 people. How realistic are their goals? And understanding of the market is important. And lastly, for both institutional and private investors, I always tell people that even founders miss this point, because when you are raising money, you get excited and different terms are served to different investors. But most of the terms today's market show that unlock periods are around 6 to 8 months, maximum 10 months. It means after 10 months, there will be a huge sell pressure on that project's tokens. And if the project isn't able to build a sustainable product, it means there is a huge chance of dumping in that period. And when people start investing, they should either have a good exit plan to understand how they're gonna exit the project if something goes down, how they're gonna hedge, and what is the best time to sell or to invest. Because most of the time, if there's a huge sell pressure from the, let's say, QRLs, from the QRL round or VCs in 8 months, there will be a huge down ride. And if the project isn't able to either launch or do something sustainable within that 8 months, it means there will be a huge pressure both on a founding team and development of that project. And eventually the investors could make that hard decision whether they want to stay in the project or it's time to quit. And understanding founders and also the team's potential to deliver something in that short period is very important. Because if you do, let's say, Web2 investment, Amazon went, I don't know, almost 10 years without any revenue. Same applies to Uber, Airbnb, and many others. Unfortunately, in crypto or Web3 ventures, it is not the story. It means you can't just go many years, because in crypto, especially once you do TG and once you start listing your project on an exchange, it means you kind of on a free flow. And while in the traditional Web2 spaces, even VCs exit to VCs, and until the company IPOs, it means the retail user doesn't have an access to that investment opportunity, but also it saves the retail investment. While in crypto, from the day one, the moment you launch your token, you kind of lose your control mechanisms. And eventually, as a retail investor, you have to look into more details rather than just hearing from the people on Twitter, on YouTube, that, oh, this is next 10x or 10x token, go invest. You have to look carefully who are the founders, what kind of product they're building, and what are their tokenomics and especially unlock period.
Interesting. Let's double click on the second one a bit, right? Like this whole idea around credentialism and making sure they went to school, right? And rating all of these things as green flags. That is probably a hot take, right? That is somewhat of a contrarian take in the industry. And actually, you have a bit of a contrarian CV yourself, right? Like you went to uni, you got a PhD. In hindsight, do you think these things were worth it? Now that you're in the crypto space, where I think very few people have gotten a PhD, or what is your view in retrospect?
Honestly, the reason I went to school was because I really love learning new things. And I think the habit I could gain to myself is ability to self-learn. Today, I'm very confident that every new thing that I start, I can go dig internet and literally find the information I need to find and self-study, which is a great skill, especially in this modern world that everything changes so fast all the time. But that is my key topic. As I mentioned, I don't think that if someone didn't go to university can never build a good startup. They can definitely do. But what are the chances of it? For example, I always tell people that so many times people come with this example that, oh, Mark Zuckerberg also dropped out from university and built a Facebook, but also he was going to Harvard, right? It's a different way than someone is dropping out from the community college, with all due respect. And lastly, I believe that people like degrees are not as important as they were before, especially for an entrepreneurial spirit, but definitely for me, it is a sign of a discipline. And I think if you are a founder and if you're taking other people's money to build your idea, you definitely need to show a discipline in order to be able to gain a trust. And if we are not friend or family, if I don't know who you are, what are the chances of me judging who you are, not based on the promise or potential, but also for existing capacity? And this is one of the greatest advices when I got from my mentor. Nothing about the business. We were always discussing the relationship. And my mentor mentioned that most of the relationships are failing because people judge each other or fall with each other's potential. But if you only judge and follow the person's existing capacity, you'll be much more happier in the life. And when I look back, it is so true. So many times I fell in love with people because of their capacity or potential, but unfortunately, they could never reach that full potential. It doesn't mean they were bad people. It means I was in love with a illusion. And whenever we do investment or we see a pitch deck, it's always a huge promise, right? This big bubble of how many million is the market capacity or how successful this company can become. But also it's about the thinking that actually will they become that successful, or what are do they have enough abilities, what they're gonna take them to become this successful? And that is a very key point. And how we can judge that, I believe either industry experience, how long this person was within this industry, and what are their opportunities to build something really, really big. Because most of the time, even the greatest ideas are not enough to have if you can't execute it. I'm sure so many people even before had ideas similar to Uber or Airbnb, but they could never execute it as the way it was executed, and they could never be successful.
I mean, let's kind of zoom in to where you are now, right? And I think maybe let's focus on the starting point and the moment you've joined Bitget. How did the team convince you to jump on board, right? I'm always super impressed when kind of like successful ex-founders decide to not start their own thing again, but join an existing team as an operator. How did that argument go, and what made you excited about the opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting journey because initially, as I mentioned, like once I exited, I decided to go to a VC as GP and start investing. I invested to a bunch of companies, and I'm one of these people who are very nosy. I just want to dig in to look into things because I come from the marketing background and marketing research. Eventually, I start putting my hand into everything from AMAs to growth journeys to understanding how different teams work. And I ended up at Bitget. The first stepping point was again marketing, especially I'm sure you guys know Bitget was partnering with Lionel Messi during the World Cup and all these like exciting times. I was very keen to kind of help the team throughout the journey. But eventually, once I was behind the scenes and supporting the marketing team, I was also coming into, oh, we can fix this in the customer care, or we can do that in here, or this is the new market we can expand, or this is the different exchange that is very strong in local, maybe we have to invest. And one day I just found out myself in the middle of this journey, because it wasn't like a direct headhunting. It wasn't that direct kind of, oh, now we need to onboard someone. I don't think even Bitget itself knew that they need a chief operating officer. And I never even imagined myself being a chief operating officer. But today, this is the journey. And this was a very fulfilling journey for me. I think, especially once you are not motivated by the earning money, because I already had my money, you need to be motivated by the growth. And when I became chief operating officer 2 years ago, Bitget was in a top 20 as an exchange and had only 12 million users. Today we have 100 million users. We are the second largest exchange by the number of users, third largest by the trading volume. And it was a skyrocket kind of a growth in 2 years that people who knew very little about Bitget today, wherever I go, people know who we are and what kind of services we offer. And I think it was a core vision that motivated me to join the team, because I knew that there's a potential, and I also knew that there's already a strong established team. And I think Bitget was one of these ventures that passed all my, tick boxes in terms of the background and possibilities. And our CEO, Gracie, she's also a brilliant mind. She's a self-made woman who did wise investments, and eventually she also did her master's at MIT at the Sloan School of Business. I think that was kind of a very great alignment in between her and myself and our entire leadership team, who is coming in a very good mix of the traditional businesses and also like a modern take to it. And yeah, the rest is the history, I think.
I mean, let's talk about growth, right? And when we researched and when I digged into the numbers, I couldn't believe it. From 12 to 100 million, it's insane. But it started at the top, right? Like, what channels drove this? What was the kind of a growth and marketing strategy that it really moved the needle here?
I think like two or three large investments that we did actually paid off. Was first definitely our partnership with Lionel Messi, specifically at the right time, because eventually our team of Argentina and Messi goes to World Cup and they win the World Cup. And us being associated with Lionel Messi is such a great privilege for us that for 2 years it gave the people, first of all, gave us an access to the huge fan base of Lionel Messi. I think almost everyone in the world knows who he is, right? Secondly, when you partner with someone as big, people eventually get this excitement and understand your product, and they eventually builds a trust, because they understand that if someone partners with Messi, it means Messi definitely did his due diligence and it is something trustworthy. That was our kind of a first initial step into our growth journey. Second big investment in 2.5 years ago, we decided to invest into a Bitkeep wallet, because we believe that future is decentralized and we have to be able to offer a decentralized gateway to our customers. Eventually, we rebranded the Bitkeep wallet to Bitget wallet. And 3 years later, it is the world's most loved and downloaded wallet. We have 60 million users on the Bitget wallet side. It surpassed both MetaMask and Trust Wallet in monthly downloads, and is the new hit or new cool kid in a block. But I remember like back in times when we decided to invest $30 million, people were thinking that we are crazy. We were not as big as today, and it was the middle of the bear market. People actually were firing and doing like a mass layoffs, all our competitors. But we were like bold enough to go do that investment. But 2 years later, when things get better and people saw our growth, all our friends from OKX to Binance, they introduced their own Web3 wallets. And it shows that we did a right investment. And another great investment we did was our $30 million partnership with Ton Foundation. Because we invested into a lot of cool projects through this partnership, and also Bitget became one of the first places that we were able to list these tokens, from Catizens to dogs, and it also brought a lot of footfall to our platform, making us one of the fastest growing ventures in the crypto industry. And I think we always talk about bridging the Web 2 to Web 3, and this was one of the greatest examples, whether our partnership with Lionel Messi or whether our partnership with Ton Foundation and Telegram Games. that's how we actually could bridge Web 2 to Web 3 and onboard more people.
Stupid question, but how involved is Messi? Like, did you meet him? Do you guys hang out?
Of course, we are not like as friends. We didn't go to Ushuaia to party with him, but we definitely we featured him in two films. We went to Miami to record these films, and we had a lot of time in terms of the talking and also like a planning for this shooting. And I must say he's quite like engaged person in terms of the brand, because the entire story is very, very like a funny and inspiring to us, because back in times when we were pitching this idea to Messi and his team manages him, we didn't have as much money as we actually, they wanted us to pay for this partnership. And there was another exchange that was willing to pay almost 50% more than our budget. But we literally, that was our biggest bet. We almost were spending 90% of our marketing budget into this partnership. And at last step, we knew that we are losing this bidding war. That exchange was raising and raising. What we did, we just sent him like a 10-point bullet point list why he has to work with Bitget and how Bitget will actually not fail him. We talked about our protection fund, our safety, and all these aspects that made him sure that whatever we do will never put his brand and his credential into jeopardy. And that was the reason actually he signed with us, not because we could offer him money, because we definitely couldn't offer him as much the money as he wanted. And that's why it became very successful partnership for us over the years.
Interesting. And yeah, I can mirror that, right? So for example, Nico Rosberg is an investor in Ivy. And when we first talked and we took him on board as an angel, it wasn't clear to me how impactful these things can really be, right? In terms of the trust it creates, in terms of the doors it can open. I think it's a very kind of like non-linear thing where like we have this amazing cap table of all these legendary tech investors, but they kind of all know the same people, right? And really having like a legendary athlete, World Cup winner kind of associated with you and your brand, it's a very asymmetric upside, I think, and it can open a lot of doors that otherwise are shut, and can create a lot of distrust that you can't really buy with money, right? So I think really, really impressive story. In terms of the 10 bullet list that you've sent him. So the headline was basically, hey, we're not gonna fuck it up. And like we're the trusted exchange, and we're the trusted brand that will kind of like keep your brand integrity safe. What were the key initiatives? And I'd love to talk about the protection fund in a second. Is there anything else that you kind of like drove into that?
I think the key point was the customer funds, because whether you are in crypto or not, everyone knew about FTX case, and almost every athlete, every big team in the world were hesitant to work with another crypto company, because I'm sure the listeners know that FTX was almost sponsoring every large celebrity in the world and pouring a lot of money into this big, putting their names into stadiums. And we all know what happened to them. And every celebrity, every business were very hesitant to partner with a crypto company. And more than the protection fund, the key point was because we have a proof of reserves report that we consistently publish for every 2 months for years now. And that was a key point to show that every customer's fund is really, really safe with us, and there won't be another FTX case or anything in that form, which actually made the team believe and gain trust, because it is not just a one-time kind of reason or way to show, but we were actually consistently and transparently publishing this report for years, and they could go and backtrack and to make sure that we are completely transparent in terms of the customer funds and nothing could go wrong. And that was the biggest key element to give him a confidence.
So kind of zooming back in, we've got these 3 big bets that you guys took that kind of played out right. We've got the Messi partnership, we've got the wallet, we've got the Tone Foundation partnership. And now things are playing out and things are growing like crazy. What part of the business broke most? Where did the growth break the business, and how did you guys fix that?
I think one key point was and is about the talent, because the industry is very small and talent is very, very scarce. And in the beginning, our idea was kind of, we need to be a nuclear team, everyone in one place. And eventually we realized that we can't find the talent we need in one place. And today we employ 1,800 people in 60 countries. And most of the people are remote first in the places that we don't even have an office or presence. And bringing people to the office was not an option. And that is one of the key learning points and that we deploy, is that we don't want people to come to us. We need to go to people, whether it's our customer, we have to go meet them where they are at, or whether it's the talent, we have to go meet them there where they are. This was our first kind of a step into breaking the pattern to grow. And eventually we today are, as I mentioned, like hiring a very diverse background of the people that brought in another important challenge or learning journey for us, that this journey wasn't only about hiring the right talent, but also building or giving the freedom to the right people. Because as a centralized exchange or centralized corporation, most of the decisions 2 years ago were made centrally and then cascaded down to the regional teams. But 2 years ago, when I joined, we changed this method completely. And our current idea is that if you are, let's say, running a country operations, whether it is Turkey or Argentina or let's say UAE or Germany, you get a chance as a country leader and country team to decide what kind of operations you want to run in that country, from the customer care to events you want to sponsor, activations you want to make, products you want to offer and develop. And this freedom actually makes everyone think like an entrepreneur and understand that they are the one running their show. They're not just executing a central order, but in a literal meaning, it's more of like a decentralized organization of the nuclear teams that come together as a big family of a Bitget, but everyone kind of makes their own decision locally and everyone goes a virtually unlimited budget, but also everyone needs to be profitable within that core. And that was one of the greatest way to grow. And that's also another great way for us to understand where we need to invest more, where we are getting the best returns in terms of a business to remain profitable. And I think that was our kind of a success in understanding what is not working somewhere, how we can replicate, or the vice versa, what worked in one country that we can actually bring it to the another.
I'd love to unpack that a bit, right? Because we have this discussion at Ivy all the time where we very much think about ourselves as this nuclear team, right? And then we always say we want to build the biggest, smallest company, right? We're building a lean elite team. Everybody's in person. Culture is very much centered around our headquarters and people are here 5 or 6 days a week. And we grew up during COVID, right? And so we grew up as a default remote company, but we've kind of very much leaned back into in-person work. And I wonder how you guys manage and mitigate kind of like the downside, where the upside is clear, right? You get access to global talent, you can scale faster, but how do you keep everyone on the same page, right? And how do you make sure you have a consistent culture and a consistent direction when you have these people kind of very distributed, plus with kind of a high degree of entrepreneurial freedom? What are the organizational initiatives you guys are driving?
Honestly, as a team and as like a operations wise, we stopped thinking about how many hours who works and what people are doing in which time zone, because it's impossible to track. Our key metric is looking at people's first of all responsibilities and what are they need to deliver. And usually we have this, every team gets a monthly report on their performance, which is indicative into the business numbers. We only focus on the business numbers and business goals. And second key point for us is the responsiveness. We want to always understand who is responsive, because when you work in such a asynchronous global team, being responsive is very important. And if someone is constantly delaying the other team member, definitely they are not a good fit. And everyone understands their responsibility and how much they should not become a bottleneck and delegate or respond on the time. Therefore, when you kind of max these two metrics together, how responsive is someone and how much they're dedicated to delivering the results, then it becomes very easy. It becomes pretty challenging for people who are not self-disciplined, because here you have to put your own goals and reach that goals. And unfortunately, you can't change it midway, because there's a promise into the entire company and entire family of the team members. But if someone is kind of coming from a background where they just want to be 5 hours in an office, I don't know, drink coffee, go to 5 cigarette breaks, and not much focus on the delivering results, then they will never succeed. That is a downside of the peoples and perceptions of the working in the big companies, because they usually think that there will be someone to delegate tasks and they will need to, I don't know, set up 5 meetings and to plan, because things at Bitget happen very, very fast. And everyone is like very much focused on delivering things faster, efficiently, and in a high quality. And I have this story I've told many times before. I have an apprenticeship program where we hire apprentices across the world. They work 3 4 months with us, and successful ones, I fly them into Dubai to work with me, and we go do a lot of fun stuff also to show like a background of the Bitget when eventually we hire some of these people. When this idea came to my mind, I was at Istanbul airport. I was flying to London, and I call my team. I give them this idea, and I board this 4 hour flight to Istanbul, from Istanbul to London. There wasn't a Wi-Fi in a plane, but when I landed, my phone was buzzing because press release went out. People were adding me on LinkedIn and sending CVs. And I call my team back, and I'm like, this all good, but like, couldn't we just wait? They were like, yeah, but like 4 hours you didn't respond. I'm like, okay, but like we could have waited, but like that's the speed of Bitget. That's so fast. That's so fast that like 4 hours not responding is, sometimes can change the world and make a difference. While I know that so many times I drop an email to our clients or partners and they take days to respond. That is the biggest difference, that whenever you are a nuclear team, whenever you are in that fast paced environment, you need to focus on delivering and delivering and delivering, rather than just thinking whether shall we be, I don't know, 8 hours in the office or not. Because sometimes if someone, I don't know, I believe there isn't a magic one, but like if someone can deliver everything in 1 hour, they deserve the salary. They don't have to come 40 hours a week. But if someone takes, I don't know, 60 hours to deliver something, it is still okay, as long as we focus on what are the deliverables and have this transparent way of measuring the results, rather than focusing on the hours spent in the office. And that was our logic from the very beginning. But that said, I believe most of our team members work very long hours also.
Yeah, and I think Revolut has a similar kind of like very metrics, very outcome driven culture, right? And way of steering the company. I always wonder like what you do if numbers aren't hit and you think this is actually a good leader, right? What you do with that ambiguity? Do you just resolve the ambiguity and say like, hey, if the numbers are not hit, it can't be a really good leader? Or how do you work through these things with your team?
Okay, I have two logics, and it is even before Bitget, like from my consultancy eras. Almost all successful big companies in the world run on the fact that bottom 10-20% needs to be let go every year. And this is a brutal truth about industry, and I think no one should take it personal, because sometimes you are not a good fit for the place, and if you are not able to hit your results, it means you are not happy and company is not happy, and probably you can go be happy in somewhere else. I think this is a very kind of a brutal fact that when once you accept, life becomes very easy. Everyone from I believe JP Morgan to Baines and McKinsey do the same kind of a waterfall, where a certain 10-20% every year is departed from a company and new blood is hired, and people always feel that competitiveness. But before letting go someone, we have the 2 3 kind of an opportunities. First, we look into why someone is not able to deliver results and how we can help these people in order to succeed. Because if you put someone, I don't know, hire someone, and there can be a chance that their leader was not good, their onboarding wasn't smooth, they must have something went wrong, because we have also rigorous hiring process. But if we see that, okay, the person has a talent, but unfortunately it's not a good match, they're not able to derive the result, either we give them an opportunity to drive themselves in a different department or different career path, or go to retrain. But eventually, if we see that someone is not able to succeed 2 or 3 quarters, then probably we part our ways. And as I mentioned, I believe it is there for the best of both parties, because company, we run a business, we can't just give people unlimited chances. But also there are so many instances that someone isn't successful in one place, in one company, and can definitely go and make miracles in another place. And that is kind of my logic, even though it may sound very horrible and brutal, but I always believe that you can't keep competition going if you give unlimited chances to the failing team members. And also I always believe, as a team, you are as strong as your weakest link. It means you always need to kind of rethink who is the weakest link and how you can fix the situation, whether retraining, whether giving a different chances to people, or whether replacing the talent with someone who could drive the success up.
No, I agree, and I think ironically, usually the top performers like to see it, right? And they are inversely they're frustrated if they see people people are staying in the organization that are not delivering. So I think it has this positive flywheel effect in both directions. So we try to kind of like stay very close to people, right? And I think it's important to be super transparent about these situations, and make sure both sides know what is happening, right? And doesn't come out of the nowhere and out of the blue. But if you're able to kind of like make sure that happens, I think there's nothing cruel about it, right?
But also, like, Bitget is the one of the most rewarding companies in crypto, because last January we distributed annual bonuses, and the lowest annual bonus was in the capacity of 2 months salary, and highest was around 10 months. And it makes, there were people who took home $250,000 or $500,000 kind of a big bonuses, which is the reward part that is thanks to all this metric driven focus. And we've been consistently, like, two key points about Bitget and its consistency as a workplace. First, we never had the massive layoffs, while all our competitors were hiring in a bear run, bull market, and firing in a bear run. And secondly, we've been consistently distributing bonuses, while most of the companies only distribute bonuses when it's a bear market, a bull market, and they cut the bonuses in a bear market. We never done that. Therefore, I think Bitget is a great place for great talent to come and work. But if you are not one of those, then yeah, definitely we are not a match. And that is one of the key messages I always try to deliver when I try to hire someone. And I always say that most companies position themselves as a family. Even when I talk to my team members, I talk, we are a family, but deep inside, I believe that we are not a family. We are an Olympics team. And as an Olympic team, you are there to win the gold medal, because families always stay together no matter what. But we don't want to build a family culture where we accept people as they are, but we want to build a future where we push the boundaries to the maximum. And especially in this innovative field, in this new young industry, you can't just, rely into the convenient, but you can actually, or you have to actually focus on the fact that you have to push boundaries. You have to push the boundaries of innovation, technology, and people's boundaries.
Let's briefly talk about product. You went on stage and said every exchange must become a crypto super app. We've seen super apps in Asia. We've not really seen them yet in Europe. We're seeing companies like Revolut, maybe Klarna, kind of trying to go down that path. Becoming the super app, what does that mean for Bitget? You've talked about all these other ways to make money in the ecosystem next to trading. Maybe walk me through a couple of initiatives you want to highlight that kind of go under the strategy.
My idea of super app is very different than other people's super app idea, and it is reflected on Bitget's products. For example, if today you go to our competitors from Binance to OKX, you will see that they have light and pro versions. Basically, the one caters to the pro users, the other for light. At Bitget, we don't have that, because for me, like, the getting into crypto should be as simple as doing a one click rather than having many other options. And for me, the super app is not an app where it solves all your problems in different ways. It is a one app that solves all your problem in a single easy way. And I think as a industry, we are very far from becoming an easy place, because it still takes you, I don't know, 20, 30 clicks to set up your exchange. And I guess there are a lot of regulatory limits in terms of the KYC, AML, collecting data, people giving consent, and all these steps you have to take in order to set up your account. But I believe that as an industry, we need to find an easier way. And until we reach into that one click stop place, we are very far from becoming a super app or solving people's problems in any easy way. And when I say we need to become a super app, is the place where we become that this is one click away to onboard the person into Web3.
That makes sense. And you talked about kind of these things next to trading that you think are so important and that you want people to think about and engage in. And I think one thing we've been talking a lot at Ivy, and kind of like obviously also with our guests on the podcast, is kind of like tokenization of real world assets. How do you think about that in terms of how Bitget is going to engage with these kind of like broader infrastructure shifts happening in the industry?
I think, like, as a Bitget, as an exchange, as a Web3 company, first we invest a lot to different ventures, and also we list a lot of projects from AI to real world assets. And that's been kind of our ethos, that we have to be in the forefront of all sorts of the change in order to bring the best product to our users. But in my opinion, when I talk about the different ways of investing and making money in crypto, it is everything in between having a job, dollar cost averaging, exploring, saving products. Today at Bitget, we have so many principal guaranteed opportunities where you don't have to risk your assets, but you can actually invest your Bitcoins, Ethereums, or even USDT to earn different project tokens that can open you a way to explore without actually, I don't know, opening any sort of a risky trade. And when it comes to real world assets, it's very interesting because recently also Dubai Land Department, Dubai government announced that they will allow the real estate to tokenize, and they're expecting in next 5 to 10 years it reach around 77% of the entire real estate market in the Emirates, that people can buy become a fractional owner of the investment properties. I think there's a huge opportunities, but in my opinion, once we factor in the real world assets as a crypto assets or tokenized assets, it means that all the money that will come and pass through the tokenization process, it will not actually reflect in a long-term development of the Web2, Web3 ventures, because eventually it will only the way that you go today and you do that transaction and you get a paper certificate or a PDF file. Now you will get a tokenized file, and probably the market cap of the Web3 assets through this real world tokenization will increase. But how much actually of this tokenization will go through the stable coins is very huge, and probably we will see that market cap grows, but we won't see much of the real world assets being traded with, let's say, Bitcoin or Ethereum or any other project's token. That is actually a way that we need to think about how all this will impact. And going back, I remember that like 2 3 years ago, everyone was talking and very excited about ETFs and institutional money coming in. But today, more discussion goes towards how dangerous it is to put all this power into the institutions' hands, and how these large institutions becoming whales, and their any decision of buying and selling impacts and influences markets so much that a retail user actually suffers at the end. Therefore, in my opinion, yes, we are all very excited about real world assets, but it is what kind of a risk that it will bring into the market. It is very, very big topic to discuss. And lastly, there is so many opportunities that probably, especially in the tokenizing real world assets, because of the legislative limits and because the government and government involvement, there is a higher chance that government just will establish their own closed chains, that they will have a private access. And even though everything will be kind of a on chain and tokenized, I don't think that they will be so much decentralized that it goes through different large portals, and how much a retail user and end users like us will be able to benefit from this change. Because if you imagine, right, if there's a tokenized a building that we are all going to buy through some government portal, it won't change. It might change the UI, UX, it might change the data collected, but are we being able to sell it in the secondary market, or there will be very tight rules and we have to sell it back to the government? What will be all the other parties' involvement in this process that might actually change the entire way we perceive a decentralized world, or we perceive the real world assets and their tokenization towards what the government will impose? Because today you can easily, I don't know, 5 friends can put money together and go become a fractional of owner of an apartment in Dubai, let's say, or in Berlin. But what are the mechanisms to sell your portion is very, very different depending on a legislation, and how it can be focused and solved in future. It is, I don't know, under the question, because I don't believe that government will allow, let's say, any large exchange just list these tokens and people freely buy and sell and trade, because of the, again, legislation, legal limits of it.
I mean, let's talk about legislation and crypto policy and regulation. So how do you think about how MiCA in Europe? What are your plans for the region? You've applied, you're expecting to get the full approval soon. How has your experience been kind of working with the regulators in Europe so far?
Honestly speaking, I think Europe is a very exciting market, and especially when it comes to legislation. All the time, the crypto sentiment was that crypto people don't like legislation, but this is totally wrong, because the moment legislation legislation introduced in Europe or in any other place in the world, all exchanges come with their papers and applying to these licenses because we want to be regulated and we want that clarity. And overall, as a Bitget, we already had our licenses. We are fully licensed in UK and also in Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Bulgaria, and many other places in Europe. We had VASP licenses before Mika was introduced. And since January, the moment it was introduced, we applied and we are waiting for our in principle Mika approval from the Lithuania. And I think it's a great step for us also to serve our clients better and understand what the regulators expect from us and how we can actually, serve our customers better and build that great connection with the local authorities. But I'm always like very skeptical, especially the European law, because I studied policy myself. And my always skepticism comes from the GDPR and the way GDPR was introduced in Europe. And today we all ended up with our mobile phones. And whenever you go to a new website, it's kind of a block till the halfway. And by default, you press accept everything without know what you're accepting. Did that kind of legislation change anything in our lives? I am definitely not sure as a user. Did it just create another button to click? Probably it did. And I think my biggest fear from the MiCA or any regulation is that first it can just create a technical burden rather than solve an actual problem. And also with Europe and MiCA, I think the biggest problem for European Union to solve in future will be the innovation. And because I think for any startup, you guys run a startup, you know that it's better to hire 3 developers and fast track the product development rather than hire 3 lawyers to go and talk to the legislators. I think Mika will, even if it protects the user, it will definitely kill the innovation and opportunity in Europe. And we see that harsh regulations did what it did to American industry, and today the President Trump and American authorities try to kind of bring crypto developers and crypto companies back to US, and they promise to do a better legislation. And I think in 2-3 years we will see the similar attempt from Europe trying to make things more relaxed to bring innovation back to Europe.
And talk to me a bit about your kind of like geographical strategy in Europe, because you have this strong foothold in Lithuania, but also you recently announced that you got a VASP in Bulgaria. How does that work, and what's the strategy and what are the tactics here?
For us, 3 key markets to grow is Latin America, it is Eastern Europe and Turkey and CIS markets, because all these 3 markets has the best mix of user adoption, actually crypto or like a digital finance needs. And there's also untapped opportunities in these markets because they're developing and there's a lot of people compared to, let's say, developed countries like France or Germany or UK. Because in developed world, first, everyone has access to banking. Most people are banked. Second, there isn't economical or political pressure. For example, in Argentina or Turkey, because the money loses its value so fast, people by default are keen to acquire stable coins or crypto assets, because even though crypto assets are super volatile compared to the 90% inflation rate in Turkey, it is not as volatile as it seems. Therefore, the understanding of volatility is different. And also for people in Europe, I think crypto is a more of an hedging tool, because you get into crypto investment in order to kind of mitigate your risk, or maybe you feel a little bit excited to, to do that kind of an investment, or you're keen to trade. But for people in Eastern Europe, crypto is more of like a lifestyle. Today, if you go to Turkey or any Eastern European country, you will see so many outlets that you can cash your USDT in. That's not possible in Europe. And I think that is our goal, to actually be in the places where we can challenge the status quo and bring people a modern tool and investment vehicles rather than just being everywhere. And also the way we acquire users and get our strengths in these countries are much easier and much cost effective than acquiring customers in Europe. Again, our goal is to serve everyone better in terms of whether you are in Western Europe or Eastern Europe or Southeast Asia, everyone gets an access to the same tools. But again, the competitiveness and alternatives available is very, very different today in Europe. You mentioned Revolut's name. With Revolut, you can acquire crypto assets, you can acquire stocks, and it is also your bank. Everything is kind of in one place, which is a great tool. But also it means there's a huge competition between trade finance and traditional banks, neobanks and crypto companies competing for the same attention and same money of the user. while in developing markets, there isn't as high competition and it's much better and easier to go acquire a user and serve them better there.
Why the Bulgaria-Lithuania split? Wouldn't you just pick one and get the cash there and then passport it? Why are you setting up shop in two of these geographies right now?
The core reason is, again, legislation and the licenses we get for each country that requires a different, has a different requirement. And also, I believe Bulgaria isn't part of the European Economic Zone. I might be wrong in here. And lastly, it is also about our understanding, like what kind of services we want to offer in the locals, focusing on on-ramping and off-ramping, and what will be the legal limits in there, because usually the licenses we get has its own limitations, whether we serve the digital asset service provider or we are the virtual asset service provider, or we can serve as a full-time exchange, or whether we can also extend our capacities to lend, loan, do some institutional services, because as an exchange, while the retail user is our bread and butter and we serve 100 million customers globally, we also serve a lot of institutions that have a certain needs within the certain regions in terms of the acquiring digital assets and selling digital assets.
Appreciate that. Hey, thanks for leaning into this all with me. To wrap it up, let's do a quick round of quickfire questions. Who is, in your opinion, the best crypto investor?
Okay. I think a quick answer could be the MicroStrategy, but a long answer could be the JP Morgan, because there's a funny story about JP Morgan. Back in 2-3 years ago, they announced that they will never invest in Bitcoin, or they will never touch, any trader will ever touch Bitcoin. Bitcoin price went down 20%, and the next day, the biggest buyer of the Bitcoin were the Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan. And that's a great way to manipulate market. And I think if I was a CEO of MicroStrategy, I would do the same. I would go tell that we will stop buying Bitcoin and not invest. Price goes down and you go back more Bitcoin, or any other institution. And I think that's the danger of institutions and coming big retail in a big institutional investment in the market.
And what's something you've changed your mind about recently?
Oh my God, recently I changed my mind about Ethereum, whether it can sound very itchy in the market, but yeah, I think I had too much hopes about Ethereum and I think it's going down.
What's the biggest short in public markets right now?
Biggest short, I think anything that is, or should be the biggest short, anything related to the AI. I think we are just too much hyped about it.
Hey, that makes a bunch of sense, my man. Vugar, thank you so much for joining me on the show. And this was a pleasure. And to everyone listening out there, subscribe to all that good stuff and tune in again next week. We do this every week with amazing guests from the industry. So thank you so much for listening in, and see you all soon.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.